Stay tuned for another edition of Zoom Landlord Tenant Talk Radio. Today's topic will be Renovate to Beat Rent Control. Well, hello, everybody. Yes, another edition of Zoom Landlord Tenant Talk Radio. It is September 7th, 2024. I appreciate everybody coming out. The song of the day was Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. This is one of those oldies and goodies that the old man always plays at the beginning of these Zoom and YouTube live meetings. So happy to bring that to you. Before we go into our question and answer period, we're going to talk about the topic of the day, which is renovation to achieve market value rents. Renovation to achieve market value rents. Now, when I talk about this, we have to talk about, of course, the evils of rent control. Yes, that's correct, ladies. The evils and gentlemen, the evils of rent control. Rent control is against the foundation of a free economy. That's what this country was founded upon, a free economy. And it appears that residential income property owners are the only industry that is singled out in our country to have price controls. No other industry in the United States has price controls. Baby formula, there's no price controls. Medicine, there's no price controls. There might be price controls instituted by insurance companies, but certainly not with the government's hand. But somehow along the way, and this started back in when the soldiers came home from World War II, someone got the bright idea that residential income properties should be controlled by their price and legislated by our governmental officials. Now, economist after economist after economist will tell you that rent control perpetuates higher rents. It's a really simple formula, ladies and gentlemen. It deals with supply and demand. If you're going to have one jurisdiction that has rent control, builders are going to be reticent to build in that area. So, of course, if they don't build, more people are born and come to that area. There's going to be a higher demand. And, of course, the rents are going to go up. Every economist who has studied these jurisdictions have determined that rent control is the problem why rents are high. If you have a free economy where people are allowed to build units and there's no governmental intrusion, then you're going to have more units, more supply, then obviously the price is going to go down. And what tenants don't understand when they think it's a good thing to have rent control, what they don't understand is who's paying for these rents. And the truth of the matter is, it's new tenants are subsidizing older tenants. For example, if you have an apartment house where a tenant's been living there for 20 years and the rent is ridiculous, $782 for a two-bedroom apartment, well, the next time there's a vacancy, the new tenant coming in is basically going to have to subsidize that. So the rent for the new unit will be much higher because the landlord has to try to get market rents as a whole for his building. So the whole concept of rent control is against, of course, the foundation of our country, a free economy. But in the end, what it does is it just creates what politicians seem to not want to happen, which is obtaining higher rents for these units. If you let the market determine what the rents are, it will be fair, just like every other industry which is not controlled. So many years ago, they had on the ballot Proposition 20, which was a proposition to institute statewide rent control. I know my law firm and all the apartment associations and all the other realty groups lobbied so hard against this. And in the state of California, this proposition was defeated, I'm happy to tell you, 2/3 to 1/3. 2/3 to 1/3. People did not want statewide rent control. So what did our wonderful state legislature do right after that with the help of the governor? They instituted something called statewide rent control. Statewide rent control. I don't care what city your property is located in. People say, why? My property is located in Redondo Beach. We don't have rent control there. Well, I'm sorry. Every city in the state of California is potentially subject to statewide rent control. So if your property is, for example, subject to statewide rent control, right now in Orange County and in Los Angeles County, you can do a rent increase of 8.9% if you haven't raised it in the last year. For San Francisco and other northern counties, it's 8.8%. Riverside and San Bernardino is 9.3%. So we have rent limitations of what we can charge for our property under statewide rent control. Now, of course, if you have a local rent control jurisdiction, for example, like Santa Monica or even Santa Ana or San Francisco, then you're not under statewide rent control. You are under the local jurisdiction's rent control, and those rules are totally different. But if you are under statewide rent control, then you have to have a reason to do an eviction, and you are limited to what rents that you can charge. So there are ways to get around statewide rent control, and also in other municipalities, which I'll go into in a minute. Obviously, if you evict the tenant for cause, non-payment of rent, a violation of the rental agreement, once that tenant vacates at the present time, you are allowed to raise the rent to market value. But what if, for example, your tenant's doing nothing wrong and you have this beautiful ocean view apartment, and I'll pick on Redondo Beach, and the rent is $792, and the tenant has done nothing wrong, and you just can't ask a tenant to move under statewide rent control. You have to have a reason. Well, there is a really good reason to be able to have this tenant vacate, and that will allow you to obtain market rent for your units. So what is that reason? That reason is if you want to renovate that unit, you will now have cause to evict. It should be noted that under statewide rent control, if you don't have an exemption in your lease, then that means even a single family home, a townhouse, and a condominium, which is not subject to rent limitations, but if you don't have an exemption in your lease that this property is exempt from statewide rent control, what that means for those units is that you need cause to evict. So what happens, for example, if you rented out a unit, it didn't have the exemption in it, and I'm talking about a single family home, and then you choose to sell the property. So of course, the tenant's on a month-to-month. You think I can serve them with a 60-day notice to get out. But the truth is, if your property is subject to statewide rent control, you need cause to evict. And guess what? Selling the property is not cause to evict. So in either of those two examples, where I have this apartment subject to statewide rent control in Redondo Beach, Ocean View, I might add, the most that you can get for that would be this 8.9% increase, even though the rent's only $782. And you know, other units that you've rented out in the building go for $3,500 or $4,000 per month. And the same thing is true if you're trying to sell your single family home. And yes, you can raise the rent. There's no limitation. But I want to sell it. I would like you to move because I can't market the property unless the premises are vacant. Well, in that situation, again, you cannot ask the tenant to move because you want to sell the property. So that's why we're going to use the wonderful reason that is authorized by statewide rent control, and that is to renovate the unit. So what are the requirements in order to evict the tenant when you want to renovate the unit? Well, first of all, the work that you're intending to do must render the premises uninhabitable for at least 30 days, that no one can live in the unit. So I don't care what type of work. You have to plan the work that you're going to be ripping out bathrooms or ripping out kitchens, which is not that big of a deal. You're going to renovate, so you're basically going to rip it out. And for that period of time, it's going to take longer than 30 days to render the premises uninhabitable. And then you have succeeded in the first prong to be able to qualify to asking this tenant to move because you want to renovate. Again, the work has to take longer than 30 days, rendering the premises uninhabitable. Now, the work that you're intending to do must require a building permit. If you're going to take out the kitchen, renovate that, or a bathroom, you're going to need an electrical or plumbing permit. These plumbing permits or electrical permits have to be obtained prior to asking the tenant to move. So prior to asking the tenant to move, you must obtain these permits. You also have to have the scope of the work with a timeline. So have your contractor fill out this, quote, scope of the work showing how the premises will be uninhabitable for this period of time, what work you intend to perform, and based on the timeline, why the premises will be uninhabitable for at least 30 days. Now, this requires that you pay the tenant relocation. Relocation under statewide rent control is not a big deal. It's only 1 month's rent. You can either give them a check for the 1 month's rent, or you can give it as a credit off of rent due. But if you qualify for that and you want to evict the tenant, either to get more rent so that your rent is at market level, or you have a house that you're trying to market and you can't get the tenant out because you don't have a reason, then you might want to consider again this renovation. Once again, work required must take longer than 30 days, required to have permits in hand. And then we would be able to serve on your tenant a 30 or a 60-day notice, depending on the length of his tenancy, and asking him to vacate the unit. Once he vacates the unit, now, of course, you must do the work. If you don't do the work, then under the code, you'd have to allow him to come back in. But you must do the work, and you probably want to do it anyway because you want to get maximum rent for your premises. And then once that work is completed, then you have the right to lease the premises to market value. You do not have to release it to that same tenant or offer it to the same tenant, only if you don't do the work. So this is a very important facet that statewide rent control has allowed landlords to use in order to regain control of their property, because as we know, all of rent control is a usurpation of property rights. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my topic of the day: renovate your units to get market value. I do want to state that other local jurisdictions, for example, the city of Los Angeles, if you're not under their rent stabilization ordinance, you are under their just cause ordinance. They do allow for renovation. They have some different rules involved, including the amount of relocation that you'll have to pay, but it's all doable. So any questions, of course, you can always call my office or you can check on it online. Now, with that being said, we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And we always talk about the ground rules. And the ground rules are as follows. This Zoom / a YouTube live meeting is for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for quality legal help. If you do have a question and you want me to call on you, electronically raise your hand. That is, if you're in the Zoom meeting, you'll see that on the toolbar on the bottom. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a case with my firm, God bless you. But we do only answer questions dealing with general questions of law, not specific on the case. And that notwithstanding, we are now moving along. And I see that my old good friend, Jim Polina, is in the house. I'm going to ask you to say hello, Jim.
Hey, Dennis, happy Saturday.
Hey,
You
what's going on there? You're working in.
you caught me in between tenants. I'm going to be making this garage into an ADU. So between tenants, we're going to be moving the water heater to outside over here, and
Mhm.
see that that's outdoors. We're moving the furnace inside behind that wall right there. That's a closet, and we're moving the laundry into a closet slash hallway. This will be opened up in the hallway, and it is going to be that laundry room right in there. So, yeah,
Couple
we're
of
doing a lot of
things, Jim.
renovation right now.
Couple of
Yeah,
things, Jim.
yeah,
Number one, where is the jacuzzi and the sauna going to be?
that's at my house.
Okay, and last, are you going to offer it to me first?
You want to live in Pismo Beach?
Sure, why not?
Okay. So, so my question for you is, we have a tenant
Yes.
that I don't want to lose, but it's really hot where that this house is, and their AC messed up. And in my lease, it says that I may or may not replace any appliances not required by law, like garbage disposal, dishwasher, AC unit, and so forth. Well, it turned out to be like $1,000 bill because the tenant didn't do their requirement of maintaining it once a year. The fins were super dirty and it overheated, and it's $1,000. They want me to pay, and I said, no, 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 this is on you guys. You guys didn't do your part. They contacted, quote unquote, a lawyer and said, habitability, AC is included. And I disagree with that. What say you?
I say it's not a winning case that you will prevail on at that point.
Why is that?
You supply the appliance, then you have to maintain it yourself. And you have to, if it does go bad, you have to fix it or replace it. So I just don't see that. If the tenant's not taking care of it, then it's kind of the landlord's responsibility to go in there once a year and make sure that they do the filters and that they clean the unit. Tenants aren't going to do that, and there's no judge who's going to buy your argument, unfortunately.
What about habitability? Is that a requirement? AC?
Well, I mean, you have to maintain any appliance that you supply. So,
That I provide. I got
yeah.
it. Okay. Okay.
So,
Thanks, Dennis.
all
Good
right.
job.
Thank you. Good luck on your project.
Thank you much. Bye now.
Okay, we are moving on to NDCPs. Please say hello.
Uh, Good afternoon. Can you hear me, Dennis?
I can. What does NDCP stand for?
It's New Direction Community Program.
That's great.
Yeah, we help the homeless, and we, do things that are social service beneficial to the community. And however, one of these homeless individuals wants to be a jerk. And so, we have a hoarding problem in the Los Angeles, single family dwelling, shared room. And one thing that I did back in June of 22 is I sent him a 90-day notice because we are not under rent control. I sent him a 90-day notice to raise the rent to twice the value because he's taking up the whole room with his hoarding, so we can't rent the other side. So in June of 22, I sent it to him and he ignored it. And so nothing was done because of it. And so I wanted to understand, is that still valid? Because it seemed to be before they put in some change of law that I believe was like August of 2022. So I wanted to say
What city are we talking about, sir?
Los Angeles.
And this is a single family home?
That's correct.
Okay, so unless you have a special license that was authorized by either the state or by the city, then technically you're not supposed to rent out rooms. Do you have some sort of a boarding house license?
No.
Okay, so you're renting out rooms, and I know you're doing this for a charitable purpose, obviously,
Right.
but I don't think that rent increase is going to be legal. However, you're trying to indirectly solve the problem when we might as well directly solve the problem. So did this tenant sign a rental agreement?
Yes, he did.
Okay, well, I'm sure the terms of that rental agreement states that you have to keep the premises neat and sanitary. And I'm sure it also states that you're not allowed to store items in the common areas, and the common areas would be that which is not in his room. So I think what we need to do, or what you should do, is to serve a notice to perform or quit, giving him 3 days to clean up the mess. And if he doesn't, then you have the right to evict him.
Yeah. So even though what you're saying is that increase in rent, it can't really work because we don't have a.
Yeah, you don't have a boarding license, so this might be considered an illegal tenancy, especially if you have more than 4 boarders
Yes.
in your property. So, and the city doesn't take kindly to that. You might want to explore getting some sort of an exemption, because basically this is a charitable work. But if
Right.
not, then I would just do the direct approach, which is to evict them based on a violation of the rental agreement. Anyway, thank you very much. We are going to move on to Jason Vayala. Say hello, please. Hello, Jason. There you go.
Yeah, hello, sir. Thank you for taking my questions today.
Happy to do so.
Thank you. I have a single-family home in Orange County, and the tenant did not sign a new lease after the lease expired and would not move out. My lease agreement includes that if such thing happens, then the tenant will be responsible for paying $250 a day as a holdover fee. Is that something?
Okay, so let me get this straight. This is a single family home,
Yes,
only one house on the lot.
yes, sir.
You said it's in Orange County, but what city?
Costa Mesa.
Okay. So the rental agreement states that if you, first of all, when was I presume that the lease was entered into after November 2020.
Yes,
And did the lease have this quote exemption that stated that this property is not subject to statewide rent control?
yes, it includes that.
Okay. So if it's not, then instead of trying to hold them to the $250 a day, which might shock the conscience of some judge at some time, I would just serve the tenant with a 60-day notice to vacate. You don't need a reason. If you want him out, that's what I would do. Now, did he ever pay rent for the 13th month? Because this was a 1-year lease. So did he pay the 13th month's rent?
Yeah, the page 13, 14, and 15th month, which
All
I
right, so
returned
he's
every
been there
time.
longer than a year. You've kind of accepted it by taking his rent that he's now on a month-to-month. So it's a
No,
simple
I returned
case.
it. I returned it.
Oh, so you haven't accepted any rent?
Correct.
If you haven't accepted any rent past the 1 year, I mean, up to the 1 year period, then we can start that eviction right now. This is one of the few cases for eviction where we don't need to serve a notice to quit. We would just be serving a lawsuit on the basis that the lease terminated, for example, on August 31st, and you did not vacate. So we could immediately start that case without any further notice, as long as you haven't taken rent for the month that preceded the termination of the lease. So we can go forward with that right now.
Okay.
So you
And
got a good case, and if you want this guy out, we need to file an eviction lawsuit. If you want, you can call my office. Anyway, thank you very much, Jason. We are moving on to Daniela Moskowitz. Say hello.
There I am. Hi, thank you, Dennis. Thank you for doing this today. Really appreciate it. So I have a prospective tenant, California. My property's in California and the city of Los Angeles. I have a prospective tenant that would like to move into an apartment with his girlfriend. The girlfriend doesn't qualify to be a tenant. Is there a way that I can add an amendment to the lease, adding her as a long-term guest? And avoid the 30-day limitation in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, well, first of all, this is an apartment?
It is.
Okay, if she moves in with the guy, okay, she has tenant's rights, regardless of how you designate her as just an occupant. The bottom line is that you should always, every adult should sign the contract if you're going to rent to them, and every adult should be listed as a tenant. If you have the right to reject the applicants on the basis that one person has poor credit. So even though one has good credit, you're looking at it in totality and you have a right to reject it. But if you want to take them both, then they're both going to be, even if you didn't have her sign the lease and she's just listed as an occupant, she's still a protected tenant under the LA Rent Control Ordinance. So the bottom line is put them both in as tenants. And if the man moves out, he's still responsible for the rent, even if he moves out, just to let you know, because the way the law looks at it is that a partnership rented the unit. And when the partnership totally vacates, then the partnership is not responsible.
Got it. Thank you. Great, great. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. We are moving on. Good question, by the way. Zena. Hi, Zena. Say hello. Zena.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, young lady.
Hi, I think you answered my question. I just wanted to confirm that regardless of the city you live in, it must indicate on your rental agreement that you, in my case, have one property, one house, one legal house on my property with the city of Pomona. And so that lease must state in there that this property is not under the statewide rent control.
Well, I would put that on the rental agreement. And by the way, that rental agreement is on my website and there's a little box to check that it's not subject to it. But the problem that you're talking about, you kind of tipped your cards a little bit and that you have another unit on the property, whether it's
Yes.
legal. And is that unit rented?
No, it's not rented, and it's actually a granny unit or a storage unit. The city of Pomona are unsure what to label it as. The previous owner was trying to make it into, I guess, a second unit, but at the time ADUs were not popular. Now they are, and they would like me to convert it into a ADU, and I'm on the fence about it.
Well, first of all, does it have a kitchen?
Well, no, not well.
Well, I don't think I got an answer. It doesn't have a kitchen.
I'm not. It's all not sure.
Okay, well, the bottom line is if you're not renting it out, there you go.
Okay.
If you're not renting it out, I'm glad that we could see you there. Thank the gentleman in behind who obviously did this magic. If you're not renting it out, you're okay. Then I would think that it's just a single family residence, and I would definitely put that exemption in the rental agreement. Even if you're not sure, I would put it in the rental agreement.
Okay. And I also want to say thank you so much because you make everything pretty clear, and for me to not fight every little word in the contract. So I appreciate you and thank you so much.
You're very kind. Nice seeing you. Okay, we're moving on to a gentleman by the name of Amarito.
Afternoon, Mr. Dennis.
Good afternoons, young sir.
Oh, I have a question. However, I did want to clear something up off of your main topic about renovations. Does that, I remember you saying that potentially it may not apply, I guess, depending on what city or what jurisdiction,
Correct.
to people that live in units that are over the age of 62. Is that true?
No, the age for statewide rent control has nothing to do with that. And even if let's pretend you have an apartment house that was built in 1980 in the city of Los Angeles, your property would not be subject to the rent stabilization ordinance, but it would be subject to what they call just cause ordinance. But even in the city of Los Angeles, you have the right to ask a tenant to move because you want to renovate the unit, and they have the same rules. It's got to take longer than 30 days. You have the scope of the work. The city of Los Angeles makes you actually do it one step further, where we actually have to file an application process with the city. But to specifically answer your question, there's no exemption if somebody's over 62 for the just cause ordinance.
Got it. Okay, great. I guess my main question was, so I have 3-bedroom apartment. There's like 4 units on one lot. This one unit has 3 bedrooms, and each one's occupied by 3 different people. One of them is causing trouble, I guess. They're not paying their fair share of the rent. I guess they initially went in and they're all going to like divvy it up between 3. And apparently this one individual isn't paying his portion. Is there any way, because I like the other 2 tenants, is there any way to get rid of that one because he's not paying his rent? Or
Well, there's one rental agreement, correct?
yes,
And all 3 names are on the rental agreement.
yes.
There's no such a thing as a partial eviction. You got to evict everybody or nobody. And as we always know, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So if one of the partners isn't paying his rent, you're going to have to get rid of everyone.
Oh, okay. But just out of curiosity, so say I go through the unlawful detainer and all that, the process with the lawsuit, and then eventually the sheriff shows up, and then I guess can I just say just get
Yeah, but
that guy has to go.
Yeah, you could then put the other 2 back in, so A and B can
Yeah.
move back in and C's out. But the problem is, what if, C calls them in the middle of the night and say, hey, I want to come back in, and A puts them back in. Now what are you going to do? So it really becomes a mess. It's okay to rent to a partnership, 3 separate
Sure.
people. But again, if anyone's bad, they're all bad. I mean, would you have the same issue in your mind? For example, if you rented to 2 people and they happen to be husband and wife, and the husband pays his share,
Mm-hmm.
but the wife doesn't pay her share. So I'd just like to evict the wife. See, it doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
So you rent it to a partnership, the partnership pays or they don't pay. Anyway, good
Understood.
question.
Thank you.
And we are moving on to Michael and Sarah, who will tell you the name of his wonderful management company. Michael, go ahead.
Hello, Dennis. Nice seeing you. You look younger, so you should take more vacations.
I think you're right. I got a little bit more sun, so I don't look as pasty as I usually do.
Yeah. Well, good to see you. I'd like to sign up for cash for key investment opportunity. Is it still available?
Okay, so last week's topic was cash for keys. And that is, it's a strategy, again, to beat rent control, where you're offering a low-paying tenant money to move. And the example that we used last week was, even if you could get $1,500 more for the unit per month, it's worth $30,000, $35,000. Yeah, if you want to do a voluntary vacate agreement, you just need to call the office, and there'll be some attorneys that'll be happy to take the information.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And we are moving on to, let's say hello to Anna. Anna, how are you today?
Hi, Dennis. How are you?
I am good. It's Saturday, and I've finally stopped working because this to me is a love of joy to do these types of broadcasts.
Well, I'm grateful to have you. Dennis, in November of 2023, a single tenant moved in, signed a 1-year rental agreement, and then 6 months later, he wanted his girlfriend to move in and then add her to the rental agreement permanently. So we allowed it, but we had them sign a new rental agreement, and then they agreed to pay 10% more. And in October this year, it's going to convert month to month. And now she wants to move out and be taken off the rental agreement. And then he wants the rent to go back to the original rate that he was paying on his old rental agreement. How do I handle this?
Well, you handle it by, if the extra tenant moves out, you got to give back the 10%. You got to lower the rent. It's as simple as that. Because notwithstanding the fact that you did a new rental agreement for a total of 110% of the old, his rent really is what the old rental agreement was. So you'd have to reduce the 10%. So in the city of Los Angeles, you're entitled to a 4% rent increase. So at least you won't have to give back you won't have to lower the rent 10%. You could lower the rent just 6%, because you are entitled to a 4% rent increase if we're talking about the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, and then what about her being on there and he doesn't want her on there anymore and she
Well,
is
does
gonna
she,
vacate?
well, does she want to be off the lease?
Yes.
Okay, so then everybody's in agreement. She wants off and he wants off, so take her name off the lease.
And then do I have her sign any particular form or to
She
acknowledge
could
that?
just say, no, she could just sign it with just a little statement that I hereby ask to be removed from the lease. That's all, one sentence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to a cell phone, which ends in 0497. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. It might be *6. To unmute yourself from a cell phone, *6. I think it's *6. Are you there? Say hello. You have to unmute yourself by hitting *6. Okay, we tried. We're going to move on to Valley Merchant. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Valley, are you there? Running into a little bad luck. Do you know how to unmute yourself? Okay, we tried. Let's go on to Sam. Sam, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi, Dennis, can you hear me?
I can. Well, at least it wasn't me.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So my question for you today is, under the auspices of liquidated damages when a tenant leaves early on their own, what is a reasonable lease break fee that can be put into a rental agreement that will not shock the judicial conscience of the court? In other words, and it would not give rise to a duty to mitigate, such as having
I
reletting.
don't know, probably a couple months rent because that's how long it would take you to release the premises. So for the people who are listening, what you're referring to is if I have a 1-year lease and I leave after the 3rd month, then technically I'm still liable for the remaining 9 months of the lease. And the landlord can hold me responsible. But in that situation, the landlord has an obligation to mitigate the tenant's losses by trying to re-rent the premises in as easy fashion as he can. If it takes him, for example, 3 months to re-rent the premises, then the tenant would only be responsible for that 3-month period. And what you're referring to with your liquidated damage clause, Sam, for the audience, is that, hey, I don't really want to have to go through this problem of seeing how many months it'll be vacant. I just want to say, hey, look, if you leave earlier than I get, and I'm suggesting 2 months rent as liquidated damages, I don't see a problem with that, Sam.
Cool, thank you.
All right, good question. I'm going to try one more time to go to Valley Merchant. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself if you can. Otherwise, we're going to move on. And I think that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to move on to Greg. Say hello, young sir.
Hey, how are you, Dennis? Thanks. I had a question. If I understand the reasons for doing month to month in the city of LA, but if it's like in Redondo Beach, if we want to do a 6 or 9 month, is that okay, especially for trying to avoid Section 8? Or is that running a peril of maybe getting stuck with Section 8 tenant?
Greg, I love you, but it looks like I need glasses with the whatever you're showing me.
Green, here you go.
Yeah, I think you need to clean your lens or something. But in any event, if you're in a jurisdiction that has statewide rent control, you do not need to have a reason to evict for the first year. In the city of Los Angeles, it would be the first 6 months for JCO properties, but for statewide rent control, it's 1 year. So yeah, it would be okay to do a 9-month lease or a 6-month lease or a 10-month lease. You just don't want to do a 1-year lease because then they've been there longer than 1 year.
And that also benefits us if we want to try and avoid Section 8 doing a 6-month lease. That they won't accept that short of a
Yeah,
lease.
they
either.
won't accept a 6-month lease, I've been told. I recommend just doing a month-to-month tenancy. And this way, Section 8 will not approve your tenancy for that Section 8 tenant, which is a way to avoid Section 8 applicants.
So that's
that's
if I'm
offering
worried about
month-to-month.
that, I should do month to month on everything then and not
I,
take the
I
risk.
think it's better now to do month to month. Most landlords aren't chasing tenants if they move out early, notwithstanding
Mhm.
Sam's position. But I just think that it just gives, we're in such a litigious world and there's so many laws against landlords. I think that's just easier to deal with this if they're on a month to month.
All right, another quick question. I have a space below one of our rentals that used to be a rental in the city of Hermosa Beach, but the ceilings are too low, so they had to shut it down, and it's kind of just a storage place now. But if I wanted to rent it, not as a separate like unit, but actually an additional living space for the person that lives above that, would that be okay? Would that be an issue if like I'll charge more rent, obviously, for that?
I
Or
don't
no?
know. I would have to know the laws dealing with whether that could even be considered a living space. You'd have to check with the building and safety. You can certainly rent it out as storage, but
Okay.
I don't know that you can rent it out as a living space unless you get confirmation from building and safety from Hermosa Beach.
All right, and the last question, I got a realtor sent me this thing, and I figured you'd know because I don't trust all the mailers I get, but they told me that the SCEP is no longer mandatory unless for the city of LA, unless they have an actual warrant. I got this thing from a real estate agent, and I haven't heard you talk about it. I haven't heard it from anyone else.
Well, okay, what they're saying, you still have to pay it, but what they're saying is that they don't have the right to inspect a unit. There was a case that came down unless they have a warrant. But let me explain something. If you tell an inspector from the city of Los Angeles, hey, I'm not letting you into this unit unless you have a warrant, they're going to write you up on everything that's on the exterior. You're just going to be in a whole lot of hurt. So while, yes, you can stand on your rights and not let them in unless they have a warrant, which they're not going to be able to get, you're still going to be in a whole world of hurt because they're going to come after you in ways that you cannot believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
All right, that's just kind of practical advice that I like to give. There's the law, okay, and we know the law. And then there's the judges who rule on the law, which basically do whatever they want. So we always have to take a kind of a very easy path so that we're not really trying to push the envelope. And with that, Julia, how are you today?
Hi, Dennis. I'm good. I'm good as always. Thank you. So I have a question on rental insurance. So are we required to ask for like a copy of a certificate of insurance? Do we need it?
Okay, so we are talking about renters insurance.
Right.
And under some appellate court decisions, you can't evict the tenant on the basis that they didn't obtain renters insurance, which was a condition of their rental agreement. It's considered, this court said it was trivial, it wasn't substantial. So there really is no reason to demand it. You just want to make sure that it's contained in your rental agreement that the tenant must have renters insurance. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to shield your own liability because the paragraph will go on to state that you cannot hold the landlord responsible. You are to obtain your own renter's insurance, which will cover any damage to your personal property, like through no fault of the tenant, let's say a pipe breaks, and also that this renter's insurance will cover your relocation expenses if you have to temporarily relocate. So I like having that in there. So when the tenant comes to you and says, oh my God, my apartment is destroyed through no fault of mine. And by the way, can you hook me up with the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton? You can say, I'm sorry, you had to have insurance. I hope you had it, because quite frankly, all you can do now is look towards your own insurance company for compensation.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Julia, good questions. And Juan, how are you today, young sir? Mr. Juan.
He's trying to call me now.
Hey, how are you, sir? Up. Say hello. Oh, wait a second. I think you're still muted. Try again to unmute yourself, young sir. Well, I heard you a little bit. I'm asking you to unmute. Can you see? You're not.
It-
Yeah. Oh, well, try it one more time. I just hit the button. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Go ahead, young sir.
Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate your guys' help. I try to watch you every weekend. I have a question. I have a tenant we are under RSO. It's a 4-unit apartment building. And they've been living there probably about a good 15 years, but they play a lot of loud music. I've asked them to not do that, but they say that as long as it's not 10 p.m., they're allowed to. I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, well, first of all, they're wrong. They're not allowed to create a nuisance. You can create a nuisance, at noon, I could be blasting my radio at noon and it's reverberating throughout the complex. So you tell them that that 10 o'clock doesn't exist, that they're not allowed to create a nuisance, that I'm getting complaints from other tenants. And if this continues, then you'll be the happy owner of an eviction because I'm going to file against you. That's exactly what I would say to them.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I had one more question, please.
Sure.
It was partially answered, but I'm like the other caller that I actually have a unit which I had 3 gentlemen wanted to rent it, but I actually did do a separate lease for each one. I just want to make sure that that's legal.
First of all, it's not smart because if one tenant doesn't pay the rent, you're going to have to do an eviction against that one tenant, and then you're not going to be gaining your rent. You want to put them all on the same rental agreement. What is this under the city of Los Angeles?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you're
RSO.
creating 3 separate tenancies. I would try to get them to all sign one rental agreement for the combined rent.
Okay, but on this, like I have them now, if one of them did, I mean, it is legal though to have 3 separate leases for 1 unit?
Well, you're basically renting out bedrooms. Is what
Ye-
you're doing, and the city of Los Angeles frowns upon that.
Okay,
There's kind of some question of whether if you're less than 4 units, whether that's legal or not. But again, you're in a situation where if one person's not paying the rent, you can only go after that one person.
yeah,
And then how are you gonna, then you're gonna foist a stranger into the unit to live with these other 2 people. So it's kind of a mess. Your best situation one is to get them all to sign one. But thank you very much. We are gonna move on to Ben. Ben, how are you today?
Hello, Mr. Dennis.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions. One is the renovation method that you said at the beginning of the call. Would that work for RSO units?
No, it doesn't work for RSO units. RSO units, or let's say the city of Santa Monica, West Hollywood, or unincorporated areas of LA County, those do not allow for a renovation eviction. If you're subject to the just cause ordinance for the city of Los Angeles, that is those units built after October 1st, 1978, or if you're subject to statewide rent control, then you can do it. But for RSO units in the city of Los Angeles, no, that would be great. We'd be jumping on the bandwagon on those, but they'll never let that go, sir.
And then can we collect late fees?
You can collect late fees if your rental agreement has a proper late fee provision, if it has specific language. It just can't say if you pay your rent late by 5 days that you're going to incur a $50 late fee. There has to be specific language. And if that is contained in your rental agreement, I know it's in mine. If anybody wants to see the correct terminology for a late charge provision, go to my website, evict123.com. Go to the free form sections and scroll down to the lease and take a look at that paragraph.
And is there a limit?
Well,
Like
it has to be reasonably calculated based on the fact that of what it's costing you that your rent wasn't on time. That's the kind of the formula. You just can't have, quote, a penalty of $80. You have to justify because of additional counting and the time and effort to now keep chasing this tenant. I have in my rental agreement another one, which is, I think, really good, and that is that the tenant owes me $50 if I have to serve a rental 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. And that certainly can be upheld. And if the tenant if I serve that 3-day notice, then I got to get not only necessarily a legal late charge, but I also get compensated for serving a 3-day notice. So I really like that provision that I put in my contract. Anyway, thank you very much, Ben. We are moving on to Alexander. How are you?
Hi, I'm actually Susan. My husband's here. Longtime watchers and supporters. Thank you for taking my call.
Now, is that a real background?
No, I wish.
Because it looks so nice with those bay windows there.
I know. I wish.
Okay.
So I'm experiencing something. I have a fourplex and it belongs in an apartment owners association. There's about 50 buildings. Half of them are owned by an apartment community, and the other half are owned by individuals like myself. And I've been paying since 2016 dues of pool dues. I just was informed because I have my apartment building for sale, and one of the agents went to the office to look at the pool, and they told her that my building is not allowed to use pool access. She called me last Saturday. This is news to me. I called on Monday and they informed me that they put this in effect in January during cold season. I wish they would have let me know. That would have been perfect for me to tell my tenant, because only 1 out of the 4 is rented because I'm trying to sell the units, the whole building. And they are not allowing an accommodation. I said, since you didn't give me notice, I need to give my tenant a 30-day notice. Would you allow an accommodation for the next 30 days? And they are not allowing it. I don't even know if I have any recourse, but I just wanted to ask you.
Well, you're in some sort of a planned community, which has their own CC&Rs. Someone would have to review that to see what your rights and responsibilities are. It's really beyond, quote, a landlord-tenant question. But you obviously leased the property to somebody with the assumption that this was had pool privileges. What city is this property?
Riverside.
Okay. And so you're under statewide rent control because it's
Just the normal. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would, I mean, if the tenant complains, technically you would have to lower his rent because you're taking away an amenity. But again, you'd have to check with the bigger question that you're asking is with the planned community, can you do anything in that? You'd have to have an attorney review that information.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And we are moving on to Steve Nemeth. Hello, Steve.
Hello. Thank you for doing this. We certainly appreciate your help. I have 2 quick questions. The first one relates to renter's insurance that you were just talking about. If the tenant doesn't pay the renter's insurance and the landlord wants the tenant to have it, can the landlord legally pay for it? Pay for the policy?
Yeah, I mean, unless the insurance company is going to complain about that, and I don't know why they wouldn't. So I would just inform the tenant, look, if you don't want to get it, then I'm going to get it for you. I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, great. And my other question is, if you have a property that, say, has a single-family home on it built in 1955 in San Fernando Valley, and an ADU is built that's new, does the existing house fall under rent stabilization ordinance?
And the answer is yes. You're going to have to register that 1 unit. You're going to be limited in your rent increases. So before you get the certificate of occupancy for that ADU, make sure that your rents are at market level.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Sandy, how are you this weekend?
Hi, all right. I spoke to you a few days ago and I'm very new to this, so I have a bunch of basic questions. So please, it sounds like you're pretty patient though.
Not really.
I had somebody go to the property to take photos to get the trees trimmed, and they left with a girlfriend. I don't know if the girlfriend is moved in or not. How do I prove that? What do I need to prove that?
Okay, so trying to put my head around what you were referring to. First of all, what city is the property located in?
Highland Park, Los Angeles.
Highland Park. And how many units on the property?
a single family.
Okay, so the person, I'm trying to get the facts, the person who was trimming the trees believes that that somebody else is living there?
Maybe, yes. So there's two people on the lease, two men, and then there's this girlfriend who was seen leaving the property. I have no
Yeah,
idea if
but
she was
I
deemed-
could have a girlfriend leave the
Yes.
property. That doesn't mean I'm living
Right.
there. So
Exactly.
the fact that you just saw one person leaving, it could be my grandmother leaving the property. So I mean, unless you have other proof, I mean, I wouldn't.
Well, how would you obtain that kind of proof is my question.
Generally with your eyes, you see the same person there day after day, you see them coming and going, using
Oh.
their key to get in, then that would indicate. But if it's a single family residence, you're not subject to any rent limitations. So if you wanted to just raise the rent, hey, yeah, you got 3 people there now and I want to raise the rent, you can do so to any level. Even if she's not living there, you can raise the rent.
So that's the question is, I had a property manager, if you remember that conversation, and she's flaking on me. So this is all new to me and I'm
I
quite
understand, but
overwhelmed.
again, you're a single family residence with only one house on the lot. You can raise the rent if they're on a
By how
month-to-month
much?
tenancy. There is no limit. You can raise it to market level. So whatever the market level is for a house like that, you can just raise it. If you're going to go above 10%, then you need to serve a 90-day notice plus 5 days for mailing. I'm going to move on because we have a lot of callers, Sandy, and I'm going to go to John Cohen. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
I've got a question. So if I have an existing tenant that's been there a while and it's just a regular rental situation, but then they come to me and they say, well, I've just obtained a Section 8 voucher and I want to change this over because, Section 8 will pay, let's just say 80%, whatever it is. Am I forced in any way to accept their voucher? And
the new laws of the state of California state that you do have to accept a voucher, that you have your property rights have just been ripped out from under you. But again, the way to get around this is, I presume this tenant is currently on a month-to-month tenancy, correct?
Yeah. I mean, well, it was originally
But
a
now
year.
it's month-to-month, right?
Right.
Okay, so if it's month-to-month, Section 8 is going to ask you to sign a 1 year's lease, and you're saying, no, I'm only going to do a month-to-month.
Yeah. Plus, they're paying. Well, it would be to my financial benefit if I were to take Section 8. But let's say they're paying $700 a month, but Section 8 would be $1,900 a month.
Well, I mean,
If
if the total rent is more, then that's an economic decision that you have to make, whether you want to accept Section 8, because the total rent will be more. But again, a lot of people find dealing with Section 8 very problematic. So,
I've had Section 8 before, and I would rather lose money than accept them. I'm just wanting to
well,
know.
right now you have to at least colorably say to the tenant, I have no problem, but I'm just letting you know I'm not going to sign a 1 year's lease. All I'll do is do a month-to-month. Anyway, thank you very much. We are going to move on, see if we can get in at least one more. James Rutowski, say hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Dennis. Do you hear me loud and proud?
Loud and proud, young James.
Although I'm in Northern California, I believe this is a universal topic, and it's one of mediation. And I'm wondering what your philosophy on the topic of mediation is. Out here in the north, there's a push to require in several locales that in order to avoid the courts, have a neutral party come in to mediate landlord-tenant disputes, and of course they run the gamut. And as you know, some attorneys are more aggressive than others. Some are afraid of their shadows. So I guess the question to you is: mediation a viable alternative to landlord-tenant disputes, or would you always use the more traditional means of a 3-day notice? Is there any merit to mediation?
I don't think there's any merit to mediation. It tends to, first of all, is it going to be binding mediation? So that whatever the arbitrator decides, that's what the decision is. And then once you even get a decision that's binding, in order to enforce it, guess what? You can't take that order over to a sheriff and get them to evict them. You'd have to first file a lawsuit. So I think it's a total waste of time, my friend.
Well, I guess the whole selling point is that you're lowering the temperature of the dispute, number one. But number two, you have now more ammunition, if you will. If the tenant doesn't comply with the terms of what's agreed upon, it's not. They're basically agreeing to a stipulation, which you can then turn around and go to a court and say.
I see you have some tenants in the background.
Yeah, little ones. But the whole idea is,
I really don't like the idea. It's tends to be a waste of time. And you're thinking that, people are responsible. Most of the tenants who get evicted, they know they're gaming the system. There's no, ethical behavior on their part. People don't pay the rent because they don't have the money, and then they're looking for things that are wrong with the premises. It's always the second approach. So I'm not a big fan of that at all. But in any event, I want to thank you. We are at the hour. I always appreciate everybody coming into these meetings. I'll be doing it next Saturday at 3 p.m. I want everybody to have a great weekend. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody.